an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Welcome to The Fatigue Fixer, the podcast where we get real about why you're so tired and what you can do about it. Every 2 weeks, we'll gather here for honest, heart-to-heart conversations about reclaiming your energy, your patience, and feeling truly at home in your body. I'm Dr. Sarah Vedmonkar, a naturopathic doctor, Menopause Society certified practitioner, Enneagram 3 entrepreneur with enough business ideas to last me 10 lifetimes, and a hockey and baseball mom. Over the past 15 years, I've helped thousands of women just like you cut through the confusion and finally feel like themselves again. And now, I want to hear from you too. Use the link in the show notes below to leave me a voicemail, to share your story, give feedback on an episode, ask a question, or tell me what's been exhausting you. And your voice might even make it onto the show. Together, we'll get to the root of what's really draining your energy and give you the tools, clarity, and encouragement you need to fix your fatigue. I hope you enjoy today's episode. You know those moments where you remember exactly where you are when you heard something important? Well, I had one of those moments a few months ago. I was driving across town to go do my CPR recertification, and I heard our guest today, Nam Kiwanuka, on her incredible podcast, Mistreated, share that at the height of her journey with fibroids, she would go to bed fearing that she might die from bleeding out, and her kids would find her the next morning in a pool of her own blood. Her guest on the podcast, Amber Mack, nodded in recognition. I have not stopped thinking about that since. Hearing these two women share that they were afraid they might die from something that can and should be treated broke my heart, and it made me angry. Because what was making them bleed so much is something that by age 50 will affect about 80% of Black women and nearly 70% of white women. And that is uterine fibroids, also called leiomyomas or myomas, which are non-cancerous tumors of the uterus. Even though so many women experience fibroids, we still don't know what causes them. And as Nam will share about her own journey, too many women are dismissed, have their symptoms minimized or normalized, experience delays in diagnosis and treatment, or are just plainly told it's just a period and you should just deal with it. Meanwhile, their iron stores are literally going down the toilet, putting them at very high risk for iron deficiency and anemia. Today, I want to create space for a bigger conversation, not just about fibroids and iron deficiency from a medical perspective, but also about the real human cost of women being expected to push through and carry on while they suffer. Joining me today is the incredible Nam Kiwanuka. She is an award-winning journalist and is the host and producer of TVO's Mistreated, a podcast on women's health. She hosted The Thread with Nam Kiwanuka, The Agenda in the Summer, and was the co-host of The Agenda with Steve Paikin. She also contributes to columns on tvo.org. Originally from Uganda, Nam spent her early years in a refugee camp in Kenya before settling in London, Ontario. She's lived and worked in the UK, the USA, and Sierra Leone. Her remarkable career in journalism includes roles as the first Black woman in Canada to host a magazine sports show with NBA XL and CFL Crunch on Sportsnet. As a VJ videographer, God, those were the good old days at Much Music, and writing a column for the BBC's Focus on Africa. She's interviewed Britney Spears, Salman Rushdie, Margaret Atwood, and Africa's first female head of state and Nobel Prize winner, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, plus many more newsmakers. Beyond her professional work, she's a passionate plant collector with a collection to rival Allen Gardens and is determined to perfect her chocolate chip cookie recipe. Nam, welcome to The Fatigue Fixer.
Oh, what a lovely introduction. Thank you so much for having me. You made me kind of well up a few times. Thank you.
I know.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome. I didn't want to start with that story, but I felt like I had to because hearing you share that, and I'm welling up just like thinking about it, like it literally broke my heart to hear you share that. And then to have Amber just be like, oh yeah, I had the same thing,
Yeah.
was like so disheartening. And I think just so powerful that you were both willing to share those personal experiences. I wanted to start by asking what inspired or what prompted you to want to create Mistreated, where you are talking about women's experience in the medical system, including your own experience with fibroids.
I think it was because of my experience with fibroids, and Amber was such a soft landing for me because she was sharing on her line her own experiences. And for a while, I felt a lot of shame around what was going on with me. I didn't feel well. I started to feel poorly after my second child, and I had all these different tests done. And every time I went to my family doctor, again, I'm very lucky to have a family doctor. And sometimes you feel ungrateful because so many people in Ontario don't have a family doctor. But she would always say to me, everything is fine. You are a mom. You just need to sleep more, lose 5 to 10 pounds. And I kept getting dismissed, and my stomach just kept getting bigger. And, I recently found out that my fibroids they first found them in 2016, but I didn't find out that I had them until 2022 after I had COVID for the first time and I got really sick. And at that time, Amber had been documenting her own journey on social media about her challenges trying to get care for fibroids. Remember, this was, we were still in the pandemic, but lockdowns were kind of loosening up, but it was still really hard to just even get care for having COVID, let alone if you are dealing with a women's issue. And it made me, I would sit in the ER, Sarah, like I would be in the ER at least once a month, every 2 weeks, because I just could not stop bleeding. And after there was one time I bled for 52 days straight. And it wasn't that, those commercials where you're frolicking in the grass and it's like the period pad commercials.
With the blue liquid, because we all have blue period blood.
It was not that. It was
No.
horrible. And I was in so much pain. And I look back, and during that time, I never missed work. I still went to work. But the night I was up, I couldn't sleep because I was constantly changing my pad. I would sit on the toilet and just cry. And because I just was like, well, what's happening? I know something is happening. And then I was being given medication to treat something that needed surgery. I was given all kinds of medication. I was given medication at one point that pushed me into menopause. Because I guess the idea was trying to suppress the estrogen in my body. One medication I was given is used to treat prostate cancer. It just felt as if they were just trying to figure out, they didn't have any medication to treat the fibroids. They were just giving me anything and everything. And what I really needed was surgery. But I was being told that 2 years, but no one was tracking how long the wait lists were for gynecology. But they were, cataracts, knee surgery, all that is being tracked. And it made me, initially I felt really defeated because it's like you're screaming into the void. And when I saw what Amber was doing online, it felt there was a certain kind of kinship, and Amber's so lovely. I reached out to her and she shared what she knew and the resources, because again, my doctor didn't even know anything about fibroids. I eventually had a new doctor after my previous doctor retired, but no one really knew anything about fibroids. And I think looking back, there must have been this perception of like, well, most women get them and Black women are more likely to get them. It's just something that you get. But just because it's something like, even though if I'm a higher bracket of getting diabetes, we should do everything to prevent me from getting diabetes. But it was just kind of like no one really knew what to do. I was in one ER once, and the head of gynecology there said to me, I've never seen anything like this. And then when I begged for him to give me the surgery right then and there, because I was in the ER, he's like, I can't because you already are signed on to another hospital and I don't want to overstep. So if someone came in uncontrollable bleeding And the only way you could do it was to give them surgery. You would give them that surgery. But there was just all of this other stuff. And the sadness and the frustration, the sadness led to frustration. And then the frustration led to anger. And I started writing about it. And eventually I pitched the podcast for 2 years. And eventually it was greenlit. Initially, I've heard people say this is niche, which makes me so like, what is your
niche for
definition?
50% of the population?
Exactly.
And all the people who live with that 50% of the population?
Exactly. And then there's this idea that, well, men also have trouble getting healthcare in this country. And sometimes over the years, I've had a lot of conversations with people that I don't necessarily agree with. And I enjoy that part of my job. I feel like the responsibility, I think the responsibility of the journalist is to confront these issues head on and to speak to people. You don't have to agree with these things. You just have to listen to, understand, and be curious as to why certain things are happening. And so when I hear people say, well, what about men? I'm just like, can you just pause? We're not saying that men don't deserve healthcare. I'm asking you to just take a second to be curious as to why so much of women's health seems to be stagnant or non-existent and so we've done a few episodes. Like one of the first episodes I really wanted to do was on the clinical trials. Women, the NIH mandating that women be included in clinical trials in 1993. By the way, that also included so-called minorities. And I was speaking to a science writer who's been in this business for like 30, 35 years, a woman. And I mentioned that and she didn't believe me. She's like, that can't be true. And then I said,
wow.
It's true. But because she was so convinced it wasn't true, I was like, did I get this wrong? And so I quickly go back to my notes and I was like, no, I got it right.
No,
and
you're
I sent
correct.
her the information. I'm correct. I
Yeah.
sent her the information and she's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. So yeah, I do have a lot of that at night because I've been producing like 90% of the podcast. It's just me. And I've gotten up in the middle of the night saying, that can't be true. Did I get that wrong? Because some of the stuff, Sarah, is just like like why we're in 2026?
I know.
Like just recently I think it was in 2023, there was a report that showed that for period products and until like 2023, they weren't using period blood. They were using like a saline solution. And I'm just like,
and then charging $1 million for a pad or a tampon.
Right. So you're not even using the thing that would
know.
actually show you if this product is effective or not. Right. So that's how the podcast came to be.
Yeah. And then they wonder why we're angry, right? It's like when a woman comes to me and she's like, I'm angry for no reason. And I'm like, really? Yeah. I can think of 1 million reasons, right? Yes. And this is just one small reason. And I think what you're saying is so important, that we normalize things that are not normal. Like if a man came into an ER, I was thinking about this and I know it's not the same, but if someone walks in with a gunshot wound, you're not saying, oh, just wait, sir. We have to get you in the lineup.
You will treat it.
You'll treat the blood loss.
Yeah.
And yet, I can't remember if it was you or Amber, literally hemorrhaging in the bathroom of the ER and having a male nurse walk in and be like, holy shit, this is an insane amount of blood. And only then was she like taken in.
Yeah.
I want to pick up on something you said early on around shame. And I know you said this in your podcast that like you still used to like hide your tampons even though you're in your 40s. So how did you navigate like the shame? What was the shame around, but also that other part of you that knew something was clearly wrong?
That's a great question. I think the shame part of it is that we have been taught from a very young age to keep our periods private. When you go through, that's part of the reason why we tuck our pads in our pockets, our tampons in our pockets, and everything is kind of like quiet. We go to work as expected, and talking about it publicly as like a forward-facing person, I was also worried about how people would look at me in my career, because as a journalist, you're not supposed to become the story. And I kind of wrestled with it for a little bit. And then I said, this is part of the conditioning, right? Where we've been told to accept certain things as women. And then if you talk about it publicly, then you can harm yourself. I have my daughter's 13 now. And when I was going through all this, it's been like 5 years of trying to get the care that I needed. I kept looking at her and just worried, like what you were saying about, that is something that consumed me every night. And for them to see that happen to me. And I also didn't want people, if something did happen to me, for people to say, well, she should have asked for help. She should have spoken out. She should have called it out. Because we hear that in many different scenarios when things happen to women. Well, you should have said something. Why didn't you say something? And I think when I became angry, that anger, and also the curiosity part of it, as a journalist, like I always follow where the story is. I was like, what is happening? Why haven't we ever spoken about this? We have these huge conversations around women in leadership. We tell women to lean in until you're like lying on the table. You're not leaning in forward enough, right?
Right.
But then if you're experiencing ill health, there's nothing. It impacts your life in all kinds of ways. By doing this podcast, I learned that women spend 25% more of their life than men in ill health. So we live longer, but we live longer, not our full, like the quality of our lives is not optimum. So shame hasn't even, I've had people make jokes about it, like coworkers cracked a joke about it. And then I just kind of fired right back because there is no shame. This should make you upset. This should concern you. And it has nothing to do with, oh, well, you were obviously birthed by a woman and it has nothing to do with, well, you have a daughter or you're married. You should just be like, oh, wow, okay. This is not about, this is looking at the history of medicine and for us looking at the way that the foundation that was laid and us saying that this is really unequal. It's unfair. It impacts families. It impacts individuals. It also impacts the economy. So if you don't care about the individuals, you should think about the economy. You should think about healthcare and maybe just kind of lean in a little bit to the curiosity around it. So shame just kind of flew out the window when I was like, this is a story and I'm going to pursue this story. And once TVO greenlit it, I spent all summer, last summer, just reading as much as I could and learning as much as I could because there's a lot of things that I didn't know. I have a lot of blind spots and I say that. I know fibroids now because I've had to learn to advocate in order to advocate for myself. But there are a lot of blind spots that I have. And then just learning about PCOS, which is now PMOS.
Yes.
Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, autoimmune diseases, 80% of cases of autoimmune diseases are women. Yep. Why is that? 70% of women with people with Alzheimer's are women. Why is that? I think we should all be curious as to why we're missing those answers and why we need to have more funding towards women's health and to do more research around it.
I also think like shame exists where there's a lack of education, right? And I think even though there's been such an explosion of conversation around menopause, there's not a lot of conversation still about fibroids or other like gynecological things that happen. And I think when women don't know what is normal, or if they've had experiences where they've been to their family doctor or other provider and sharing what they're experiencing and having that normalized or dismissed as normal, women start to assume that the problem is them, right? They start to think, oh, well, I just must have to deal with whatever's going on. And even just what a normal period is. Most women don't realize how much normal blood loss looks like. So a lot of women in my practice, of course, because no one taught us that. Like I joke, like my health education was don't get pregnant and here's how to put a condom on a banana. Like, cool. What else can you teach me about my body that I need to know for the next, 60, 70 years?
I had no idea. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Because my normal was a lot.
Yes.
And when I would go to get help, oh, it's just your period. And then when I would say that this is how many times I'm changing my pad, I'm bleeding through my clothes on the way to work. It was kind of like this disbelief,
Right.
it's like, oh, well, you must have it wrong. And again, that's the
Right.
other thing that really, like, I hope there are a lot of great doctors, obviously, but I
Yes.
really want this idea of, I feel like there should be this kind of, women are not listened to
No.
and we're dismissed, and you know your body the best. I've had people say to me, how do I advocate for myself? Because doctors are people of authority. And I was raised in a very conservative home where doctors, police, teachers, they're in positions of authority, and you don't contradict them, you don't question them. And so for a long time, that's how I was, right? But I challenge women to approach their health like you do your credit.
Mm-hmm.
Be on top of that. Be on top of it. Advocate for yourself. Push back. It's always how you do it, right? You don't have to be disrespectful. But I've heard stories from women who were sweet as pie, right?
Sure.
But still no one is listening to them. And I'm also learning that how you present in a doctor's office also impacts how you're received. Like if you have like RBF, apparently you're not going to be listened to in the same way if you're smiling. But if you're in pain, I mean,
Yeah, it's
smiling
hard
is
to
not.
paste a smile on your face when you're bleeding and anemic and
Yes,
like exhausted.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just for our listeners, by definition, a heavy period is if you bleed more than 80 milliliters. Now, what that means practically is if you soak through more than 8 super pads or tampons in your whole period. My patients are always like, in a day? No, in your whole period, you have a heavy period. If you have to wear multiple things to protect yourself to not bleed through, you probably have a heavy period. If you have to get up at night to change your protection, you have a heavy period. So a lot of women have a heavy period and again, don't realize they have a heavy period. So they're not necessarily seeking care. And I think that's one of the things that I think can really help you in your interactions with your doctor is tracking things like that, right? Tracking how many pads and tampons am I going through? How long can I comfortably keep my pad or my tampon in? That
Mhm.
kind of information I think would be helpful to your family doc if you can put some like numbers around it.
I'm so glad you said that, because I think having that information, people then can go in and say, that was me one day. It may be
Right.
like 6 hours, 7 hours. I changed my pad like every hour. The thick ones, I had to kind of like put them on top of each other and then wear like the Depends
Yeah.
granny panties.
Yeah.
Just to keep everything. It was
In.
like a whole thing. But yeah, I'm glad that you pointed that out.
Are you tired of being told everything is normal, even though you're exhausted and don't feel like yourself? You deserve better care than that. In my one-on-one practice, I help women just like you do a deep dive to figure out what's really draining your energy. Together, we'll get answers and create a clear, personalized plan to help you start feeling like yourself again. If you live in Ontario or the Outaouais region and you're ready for the next step, visit drsarahv.ca to learn more and book your appointment today. Because being tired all the time isn't normal, and you don't have to keep pushing through it. Can you talk about like the physical costs? And I think this is where the fibroids itself can cause issues. So the symptoms of fibroids are things like heavy, prolonged, or irregular periods, pelvic pain, painful intercourse, bladder pressure, can cause infertility depending on the type or the location of the fibroids, can cause
Yes.
adverse pregnancy outcomes. But the other thing when you're bleeding that much is you're very, very likely to become iron deficient and anemic. So can you talk to our listeners about what it felt like to try to keep showing up at work and parent and make it through the day when you were that depleted?
I felt like I was crawling. I felt like I was crawling, like I was on the ground, crawling to do all the things. Um, some women can have fibroids and it doesn't impact them at all.
Mm-hmm.
Other
Yes.
women have them, and there are also different types of fibroids depending on where they are. I had two of the worst ones. And when my fibroids were initially diagnosed, initially they found them in 2016, they were very small. But over time, they got bigger and bigger. So my physical body started to change. I looked as if I was 7 or 8 months pregnant. Like my stomach was bigger than when it was when I was pregnant. And my back started to hunch and I had to lean forward. My hair started to fall out. And so you can imagine being on camera and my hair is falling out and I'm getting bigger. And at nighttime, I couldn't lie down. Like if I slept, like when I went to bed, I would belch, I would burp for like three hours. It took me about 3 hours to fall asleep every single night. And my kids were small at the time. So just by the time I get them to bed, I already feel like I'm wiped. And I need to rest before I wake up to get them ready for school and then get myself ready to work. I have a very difficult job. I cannot make mistakes. And it's high pressure. At the time I was the co-host of The Agenda, and I'm a woman of color. No one really looks like me on Canadian television. So all this pressure to be exceptional, cannot make any mistakes. So all of that is weighing on me. But so when I go to bed, I cannot sleep because when I lie down, and I'm only learning about why this was happening because I would say this to my doctor, but they had no idea. So I would belch. I would wake up I would belch. Had to sleep on the side, had pillows. I ended up towards the end, I was almost sitting up, sleeping. And I realized afterwards that it's because when you lie down, everything gets compressed and the fibroids are just pushing everything, like all your organs. And I would wake up to go pee every single hour. And I also had to go to the bathroom to change my pad. So of course, I kept thinking about, oh my gosh, Alzheimer's. I'm not getting enough sleep. I would go to work, the brain fog, because I feel faint. I felt like I was going to faint. And in my past, I've fainted because I've been anemic since I was 16. And I was always told that it's normal. It's just your period. So I was really worried about fainting on the train because I take the GO and the subway to get to work. And a couple of times I bled through my clothing. And I had to call my boss and say, I've bled through my clothing. I have to go back and change, which was embarrassing. But thankfully, she's a woman and she understood and she was very supportive in that way. But then I had to figure out how to get to work because I have to be in studio to do this work, right?
Right.
And so I saved all the energy I had for work and my children.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. My friendships, most of my friendships are like, I don't really have as many solid relationships as I did because people also get tired of saying, I can't make it. And you're still feeling bad, or you feel, well, I saw you on TV. Why can't you come?
Right. You must be fine because I saw you on TV.
You must be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so it just became, and then, people saying your looks are changing, you're this and that. And people online are not the greatest. And my hair fell out. Like I was completely, you can see it like on the video, if you're on the video, like you can see it kind of growing back, but here, all of this fell out.
Yeah.
All of this fell out. Like right here, this is mostly, it's coming in slowly, but all that, my hair would just break. It was really, really, really hard. And I'm a mentally strong person. I've had a lot of different challenges in my life. And the thing that has always gotten me through it was my mental fortitude. But when you're fighting your body every single day and you're told that nothing is wrong, that it's just your period, over and over again, like something's going on. Mm-hmm. You see what's changing in your body. I couldn't have sorry to be too much like TMI.
There's no such thing.
I couldn't have like a number 2 properly.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I had to take like vitamins or supplements so it came out as a liquid. For one of the best things after I had my surgery was being able to have a proper bowel movement. So it was really, really, really hard. And I don't think people understood how hard it was because I would still show up to the things. And they would say, oh, it's just a period. Again, the idea, oh, it's just a period. Why is she not why is she so weak? Why is she so fragile? Yeah. Why can't she get it together? Right? Those kind of things. And then when I had my surgery, I had a really hard time getting the time off from work, which was upsetting. The people involved are no longer there anymore, but even just trying to get insurance, it's like my surgery was supposed to be laparoscopic. I'm in the OR And the nurse comes and I've had all my needles and stuff. I'm so nervous about it.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband wasn't able to come because that particular hospital still had very strict, as they should, COVID protocols. The nurse comes and looks at my stomach and she's like, "Oh, hun, they're going to have to cut you open." No one had said anything to me. I chose the laparoscopic surgery because I've had 2 C-sections in the past and I did not want to be cut open again.
Yeah.
And she took one look at me. And in hindsight, they didn't do any imaging.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't have an MRI. No imaging. The only imaging that I had was almost a year previous, like a vaginal ultrasound. They had no idea what was going on inside me. So going to the OR, the nurse just said this to me. And I'm like trying to prep myself because I'm a person that's like, I like information.
Yeah.
If I have the information, I can deal with whatever's happening.
Right.
But when I lack the information, because it's like, it's one thing to go in for a keyhole surgery and then another to be cut open. Because again, I've got kids, I need childcare, I need to make arrangements. And sure enough, when I woke up, they had cut me open. But they had also done the laparoscopic, like the keyhole. So I had all these scars, and now I have a wicked scar on my belly button from the keyhole. And my mind is like, if the nurse could look at my stomach and say, "Your fibroids are too big," why did the surgeon proceed with the keyhole? So they pump you up with gas or whatever for that particular surgery, and then proceed. And then once you find out, oh yeah, actually, her fibroids are too big, now we're going to have to cut her open. Like the stress, the trauma to my body, like I don't know how long it's going to take me to process that. And even before leading up to the surgery, I said, "I don't want this taken out." They're like, "We're going to take it out because that's how we do the surgery." And I was so exhausted from having to advocate for myself over and over and over again. I was just like, "Well, I don't want you to take that out. Well, this is how we do it." And I was like, "Okay." And I signed the consent form, but that's not what I wanted.
No.
But I was at the finish line where I just don't want to die. I have my kids. I need to be here for my children. I need to, and the first thing that I said to the surgeon when I woke up was, I woke up. I was like, it was, so even just the surgery itself, the mental stuff to a surgery, and when you're a mother and when you've had to deal with it for so long. And then there's no rehab afterwards, right? No rehab is offered.
No.
So
and they tell you like, you're going to be good to go in 4 to 6 weeks. And I'm like, that's not what some women might be good to go, but it's a longer recovery than what they prep you.
It's a much, much longer recovery. And I had to go back to work before I felt ready. And since my surgery, I've had a chronic pain in my back, but I recently had a really positive experience at the pain clinic at the Women's College Hospital. The doctor was fantastic. And the treatment she's given me so far is really helping. But I had to wait for 2 years again because of the wait list. So there's all these wait lists that have to do with gynecology care. And, and we don't track it. And then when you learn that in the surgery, in the OR, I mean, you probably know this, like there's a hierarchy, right? And gynecology gets like a day out of the week. And things keep getting bumped. And that's why there's a person that we spoke to on the podcast who's calling for obstetrics and for gynecology to be separated into 2 different disciplines. So gynecology can actually, like, it stands a chance to get the money and the research that's needed in that space.
Yeah. Well, and so that women's wombs matter whether or not there's a baby in there.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
One of the stats that I found after listening to your podcast is just like there's so many levels where there's problems, right? There's like the normalizing of what's going on, the dismissal of what women are experiencing. There's not enough funding. There's wait times for surgery. And to make matters worse, doctors are paid less for a lot of surgeries performed on women. So in 8 provinces, doctors are paid on average 28% less, but as high as 67% less in Saskatchewan. And a perfect example is like the procedure to untwist an ovarian torsion. They pay 50% less than the procedure to do a testicular torsion, even though it's more complicated and more risky.
Make it make sense, right? Because the other stat that I learned was that vasectomies are more complicated, and I believe they're done in the OR. Whereas, like if you get if you get your tubes tied, it's in the OR. But if you get a vasectomy, you don't necessarily need an OR.
No, my partner went to like a drive-through vasectomy clinic. Like
so
he was literally in and out in like 10 minutes.
Right, and so and it's not as complicated.
No.
But for when they do these, the billing codes.
Yeah.
The tubal when you get your tube side, it's they get paid less.
Oh my gosh.
Even though it's more complicated. So any person who has a curious mind, ask yourself, why is that?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Because also we need the care, right? So if you're a doctor or surgeon who's gotten a lot of expertise, why should you learn about fibroids? Why should you learn about surgery, like different surgeries for fibroids beyond a hysterectomy? Because you're going to get paid the same, right? It's not going to be that time that you took to learn about the different things, or even for endometriosis, it doesn't make any difference, because at the end of the day, you're not going to be paid more for doing those procedures. And I just kind of feel like we need to look at medicine and just really like break this whole thing wide open and start again, like build on what we know, because putting our head in our collective heads in the sand and pretending that this is a personal failing of the individual is so harmful, because it's not going to go away. One of the topics that I learned about was Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And the hypermobile part of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome impacts mostly women. I think the stat is like 90% of women. And this condition is so horrible. So horrible. Yet there's no one in this province to help the girls whose conditions have gotten to the point where their spines can't hold up their heads anymore. And listening to those stories just made me like, we have to do something about it, right? You've heard that thing about turning pain into purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like what happened to me is the thing that has made me like, this is my purpose. Because even starting from a place where I was ashamed and all of these things, the more that I learn about it, it's like the information is right there. And then seeing what's happening in the US, where some people are suggesting having robots help mothers deliver babies.
What?
Which is so like shocking to me, because there are all these deserts, maternity deserts, where, because they've changed the laws so much that doctors are afraid of performing certain procedures.
Yeah. And
certain places, if you have they're pushing for more women to have babies, but not providing the care that is needed. This idea that you get pregnant, you have a baby, just comes out and everything's great and that's not the reality of it. I thought that was the reality of it. The reality of it when I got pregnant and realized I needed a C-section to deliver my child, and everything that happened after that. So there are so many parts of what's happened in medicine. There's so many things that we can talk about for days and days, but unless people we need more women in these spaces, and that's the burn.
Yes. Yep.
Because, the experts that I've spoken to said that women need to be in political spaces. But have you seen what happens to women in politics?
It's so toxic. It's so toxic.
So you leave that chair at the table,
and
then those things are not addressed. Like we had a so-called feminist prime minister, and this is not about politics or partisanship or any of that. Yeah. It's about looking at the thing. We all want our healthcare to work. We also don't want to waste money. We are wasting so much money.
I was going to say there's the human cost to this, but there's also the financial cost. And I think you said this in your podcast. In the US, they're spending $42 billion a year managing fibroids. Yeah. And how much of those dollars could be saved if we listen to a woman the first time she came saying, I'm having heavy periods and I have to change my pad at night. We sent her for some imaging right off the bat. Yeah. We would save so much money, but it's so broken that we wait until she's literally keeled on the floor, bleeding out in a hospital to decide, oh, I guess there's something wrong.
Yes. And I think the cynical part of me feels as if people are waiting up for women to just give up, to just say, okay, I guess this is my life. And that was a lot of like the older generations. That's what they had to endure. I heard from a woman who her grandmother was told, her mother actually was told for 20 years she tried to get a hysterectomy because she had all of these different issues. And she decided, okay, I've had kids. The doctor said she needed a hysterectomy to deal with the condition. And again, hysterectomy seems to be an answer for a lot of things. It's not the thing for everybody. I think people should be aware of that. Like you really need to, any kind of surgery, stuff can happen, right?
Yeah.
But she said for 20 years, she had to wait for that surgery. And I just kept thinking, 20 years, what is your quality of life? I mean, I had to wait. So from 2016 to 2024, when I had my surgery, that's 8 years. And that was not great,
No.
And then now like recovering from my surgery, also not so great, right? And if you keep going back to the doctor and the doctor's saying you're fine, there are a lot of women who just say, okay. And then depending on where you live, if you have a family doctor, some of us don't even have access to a walk-in clinic, right? So I think ignoring the issue, yes, it might make it seem as if there is no problem, or if you're not collecting the data. Well, we don't know there's a problem. Is there a problem? Well, you would know if you collected the data, right? So it just kind of seems to be like this self-fulfilling prophecy of what's, and to me, some people might say, oh, it's a conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy. If you talk to any woman for 5 minutes, and see what their experience has been when it comes to them being listened to when they say they're not feeling well in their own body. And yeah, the amount of times I was in the ER and I was like, I'm wasting so much of these resources. Every time I come in, I'm just sucking up the resources that other people need. Every time I come in, the nurse that's helping me could be helping the next person. The doctor who's going to treat me could be helping the next person. The bed that I'm occupying could be used to be treating that other person. And it just doesn't seem like the best use of our very limited dollars.
Absolutely. Well, and I always say, like, women have better things to do than to go hang out in an ER or a doctor's office. Like, we're not there because it's a fun place to be. Usually by the time we get there, it's because we've been suffering.
No choice.
Yeah, you've been suffering for months and years, and you finally decided, okay, it's time to do something.
I guess I'm going to have to deal with this.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
So when you, like, with everything you've learned, your own experience, all of the stories I'm sure you've heard since that your podcast has been released, when you look at your daughter and you look at her generation, what are the things that you would hope for them to know or to be able to maybe do differently than what your experience brought?
Shame doesn't live here. Shame does not live here at all. I talked to her about her period. Her brother knows about her period.
Yes.
He knows how to help her if she needs certain things. And we talk openly about it. But what's interesting is that she seems to be also very shy about it already. And that's not from me. It's from the conditioning around her, like the people she's around. Like they're already talking about, like, this is something that we shouldn't talk about. And my daughter had a thing last year, and I'm so grateful for what I went through. And I say this because when she was going through that thing, I was able to advocate for her and to ask for imaging. And she would have had an unnecessary surgery if it wasn't for me asking for additional imaging. And the practitioner said to me at the time, oh, that's a waste of taxpayer dollars asking for an MRI. And I'm like, I'm a taxpayer.
Correct.
She's having an MRI. And then when
you can use the money for the imaging you didn't give me in my journey. Thanks.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And when she had the MRI, the imaging showed something different. And because I was like, she's 12, like, I don't want her having surgery. Because even before my C-section, no one ever told me how scar tissue can impact your health moving forward. And I really want to do a podcast on that. I just don't know, like, an episode on that about the scar tissue, like all these things that you're just not taught. And so I'm actually really glad that I went through my experience, because now I can say, nope, not on my watch, right? And that's part of the podcast, is by creating these conversations where it's like I want to give the good information, right? Because there's so much misinformation and disinformation. And I've fallen for some of this stuff. By having experts come in to say, this is what PMOS is, this is what endometriosis is, the clinical trials, this is what happened. Part of it is like a defense mechanism to say, there's a foundation of the history. This is the history. This is the foundation of knowledge. I guess for people to take it seriously, but it centers lived experience, because it's not in our heads. Because a lot of these things, it's like, it's all in your head, hun.
Yeah.
You should try smiling. It's all in your head.
It's such a convenient label and way to
it's very
dismiss women.
dismissive, right? And again, it puts the onus on the individual. It's not our problem. It's your problem. You just need to be stronger. You just need to do Pilates. You just need to lose that 5 pounds. Initially, I wanted to call the podcast Just Lose 5 Pounds, because I spoke to so many people. Everything is like, your life will be fixed if you lose 5 pounds.
Yeah. You didn't know that was the cure for every medical condition ever? Just lose weight.
For women, because
women.
My husband has never been told to lose any weight.
Probably.
For anything that he was going through.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm generally an optimistic person, but I also get very cynical kind of like when we're hanging out in this realm, because it should be, what we need is systemic change. We need healthcare change. We need financial and funding and research. We need all of that. Mm-hmm. And sadly, until that happens, it's forcing women to become their own advocates, which not every woman has the time, education, knowledge to be able to do. But I think that's what is so powerful about the podcast that you're doing, is you're bringing these really important conversations to light. You're highlighting women's lived experience, and you're helping women understand what is normal and what isn't, so that they can advocate for themselves. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your story and being so open. Like I said, I will never forget hearing you say that the first time, and I'm sure women listening will also be really moved by your story. So if you haven't checked out the podcast, it is the Mistreated podcast, hosted by Nam Kiwanuka. It's an incredible podcast, and I highly recommend you go listen to it. And
thank you so much, Sarah. It's been such a nice conversation. The listeners might not know we had a lot of tech issues, and thank you for being so patient.
Yeah. We were committed to making this conversation happen. We did it.
And we did it. We made it work. Thank you
so
much for being. Thank you for what you just said. It means a lot. We're trying to. The lived experience part of it, I always say that it's information. And for people to listen to see how this impacts. When you said about policy, because we have to demonstrate that this is a thing, and this is record, this is information. So 10, 15, 20 years later, policymakers can't say they didn't know.
No.
It's here. So this is the information that you're not collecting. We're going to do it for you. And these are the stories that you should be listening to. We're going to do it for you. And you can't say you didn't know. Because all the people that we've spoken to, we all matter, right? And our
needs matter. Yes.
And quality of life matters, right?
Yes.
So having these conversations, hopefully it pushes for more conversations, and it pushes for more change.
Amazing. Thank you for listening, everybody. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. I know your time is precious, so it means so much to me that you're here. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a woman in your life who could use a little extra energy and encouragement today. It's a small way to show her you care, because we're all in this together. Wondering what the next step is? Find out what's really draining your energy by taking my fatigue fingerprint quiz at fatiguefixer.ca/quiz. You'll discover which of the 5 most common types of fatigue you're dealing with, like frazzled fatigue, where your body's exhausted but your mind won't turn off, or drained fatigue, where no amount of sleep ever feels like enough. Your results will include recommended labs to ask your doctor about, plus my top suggestions for habits and practices that can help you start feeling more rested, calm, and in control. Because here's the thing, being tired all the time isn't normal, and you deserve to feel like yourself again. And hey, if you've got a story to share, a question, or just something on your mind, leave me a voicemail. Your voice might even make it into a future episode. Thanks again for listening, and remember, it's not all in your head. I believe you, and we'll figure this out together. I'll see you right back here in 2 weeks.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.